And you have to also recognize what happened to the presidents that didn't want this Federal Reserve system to go forward. Let me explain how it works, okay? If you have the Treasury Department that's issuing the currency, then you don't have to pay interest on it. But if you have the Treasury Department issue a promissory note to the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve then issues the currency, then this note that the Treasury Department issued, there's interest on it. And that's how the debt every year gets bigger and bigger, because we're going to be spending more money than we're taking in. And let me tell you how the tax payments work. Okay. This I couldn't believe in the beginning, but it's absolutely true. You know, when you fill out your taxes and you send a check one place and you send the tax form another place, the check that you send goes directly to the Federal Reserve, and they take that check and they send it to the United Kingdom, and the UK keeps, not the government, the UK banksters keep 40%, and then they send 60% onto the Jesuits in the Vatican. That's what's happening to our tax dollars. Wow. Now, how are we financing our government? We're selling drugs. We're selling the drugs that we grow in Afghanistan. We never had any poppies there until the war in Afghanistan. You think with all the satellites flying over, they couldn't see where the poppy fields are? No, that's how we earn our money. Wow. How does that grab you? Is that a good arrangement? Wow. No, it's not a good arrangement.
So are you basically saying that the money that's being fed into the IRS ends up at the Vatican?
60% of it, except for the 40% cut that goes to the United Kingdom. And now, let me tell you how that happened. That happened because in 1200, the King of England borrowed a lot of money from the Vatican because of wars and signed a treaty that he would agree to keep repaying the money to the Vatican. And, of course, he never caught up. So he was in trouble. And then, do you remember when our Capitol building was burned down in 1812 by the UK? Right. Yeah. Okay. We have been having to pay war reparations to the United Kingdom all these years, and nobody has bothered to tell the people about it. And Lincoln, when he was financing the Civil War, issued greenbacks directly without involving the bankers. Mm-hmm. That's why he was rubbed out. And JFK, he had a memo that he was going to sign where he was going to just erase this compounding of interest on the U.S. debt. He was going to have our currency issued directly by the Treasury Department. He was assassinated 11 days after he signed that memo. So these banksters are bound and determined to keep us, you know, what can I say, imprisoned in debt, except that it's not working, because what we've done is we've alerted all the countries of the world. I have written to the ambassadors of all these countries many, many times. I've written to, in Washington and in New York, I wrote them a letter a couple of months ago where I was telling them about the fact that their ambassadors were all being blackmailed when they tried to fire Paul Wolfowitz. So the whole world is laughing at the fact that the American public is totally in the dark and duped by their media that refuse to tell them what's really happening.
Now, I certainly want you to elaborate a little bit more on a specific point that you just made, and I took you back to it a second ago, and that's the fact that our tax dollars, you're saying 60% of our tax dollars get cut to the Vatican and the Jesuits. And I think for a lot of people out there, that's a pretty astounding, revelation, because, you think of the Jesuits, we have Pope Francis now, whom our president praises, and he's the very first Jesuit pope. And some people, when they think of the Jesuits, they think of an order of meek and humble men and all of these things. Why would the Vatican and the Jesuits be, caught up in such a stink like this? What in your perception, and what is their worldview? Are they a bunch of megalomaniacs? Are they just trying to amass a stupendous amount of wealth? What do you perceive in this whole situation for the Jesuits in the Vatican?
I'm so sorry to have to tell you. First of all, let me start out by saying that this has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the Catholic faith. Mm-hmm. This has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the people of faith that are not aware of this.
That's right.
And I have to tell you that there are, unfortunately, people who will mock the faith and they will put on the priest's garb just so that they can hide their crimes. These are criminals. These are not Catholics.
Wow.
And unfortunately, there are many of them at the very top. It's rot at the top.
Wow.
And that's the way it is, and it's been documented, and I've been working with people who have documented this. It's been going on for a very, very long time. You can read what our founding fathers had to say about the Jesuits. After Lincoln was assassinated, the Jesuits were not allowed certain things, certain privileges in the United States. And that ban on the Jesuits was lifted by Ronald Reagan, unfortunately.
That's very interesting that you said that, because, I do have some knowledge of this. I just wanted to hear what you had to say on the issue. But all throughout the 1600s, the Jesuits were actually put out of all of the nations in Europe because the monarchs there realized that they were the ones responsible for fomenting these revolutions within their countries. And Ronald Reagan, interestingly, was the first one to appoint an ambassador to the Vatican for the United States of America. And we know that Pope John Paul II and Reagan worked very closely together for the bringing down of the USSR. And so, very interesting. Anyway, please proceed.
Well, I think let me switch to where we're working together, what we have achieved.
Right.
And people are going to be surprised. But first, actually, let me tell you a little bit about what goes on with the birth certificates of your children. If you look at them, their names are all in capital letters. This is because when a baby is born and gets a Social Security number, what the bankers are doing is they're estimating the amount of taxes that child is going to generate through their lifetime as a taxpayer. And they issue a bond on the capital markets in the name of that baby. And then, this sounds improbable, but again, I'm telling you, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction.
That's right.
So when you're married and you go before a justice of the peace, your marriage license is also in all caps. It's as if two ships had met in the night.
Maritime
You're not
law.
really married.
Maritime law.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And this huge scheme has been bilking the American citizens out of their wealth, but also out of their status as citizens with a constitution.
I just have to say this once again for everybody that's watching. This is Karen Hughes, the former senior counselor for the World Bank, 20 years in the World Bank. She's not some raving lunatic. This is a well-educated individual at the Ivy League school, Yale. I think we need to listen. Go ahead, my sister.
Well, the United States is not the only country that has been, what can I say, put in this terrible situation. It's called state capture.
Yes.
But it's not hopeless.
Well, at least why doesn't the CIA at least spank the Jesuits on their hands? What's the situation with that?
Because the Jesuits are in charge of the CIA.
Wow, that's a big revelation there. Wow, you've said so much. I'm going to continue on this line because you made mention of Lincoln and him actually moving in the right direction for our country, issuing greenbacks, and because of that, he ended up in a casket. Then you have JFK, and he was trying to move our nation back in the right direction as well. Interesting enough, first Catholic president, and he ended up body bagged. So, what about all of their successors, if I can say it that way? Is it that the presidents thereafter fell in line? Is Obama falling in line? Let's just get right to the punch. Is Obama falling in line with the whole agenda, or is he pushing at it in any way? What's your take on that?
Unfortunately, he's not in a position. His wife is being blackmailed.
How so?
Because she has fallen for some what they call honey traps.
Wow.
In a hotel with two-way mirrors, she has been compromised.
I know what a honey trap is. Wow. Wow, that's...
And there are other things involving him. You know, his mother was a CIA agent, and he was raised in a way that that made him a person who would trap people with honey traps. That was his mother's job in the CIA, to entrap people in hotels.
Wow, that was a huge bomb.
I have one that's even worse.
I'm listening.
Okay. A couple of weeks ago, I believe it was the 8th of October, there was supposed to be a nuclear bomb detonated on South Carolina. And 2 Army generals made sure that that bomb went off the coast, 600 miles off the coast, and detonated undersea. And those military officers were fired. And now, at this point, there are about 180 generals and brass that are being fired. And these are the people that are protecting the citizens of the United States.
And a good evening to you on this Friday night, and we start with a developing story, a shakeup at the highest levels of the U.S. military. A top general in charge of nuclear weapons fired, and this comes 48 hours after another top military commander was dismissed. ABC's chief global affairs correspondent Martha Raddatz has been talking to her sources all day, has the very latest on what's happening right now. Martha.
Diane, these officers have some of the highest security clearances you can get and have been in charge of the nation's most sensitive nuclear arsenals. A stunning chain of events. Today, Michael Carey, the 2-star general responsible for the nation's 3 intercontinental ballistic missile wings, fired from his command. The reason? Personal misbehavior on a military business trip. This comes just 48 hours after President Obama himself relieved the number 2 in command over the nation's nuclear arsenal over his suspected use of counterfeit poker chips. These follow an alarming string of general officers losing their jobs this year for inappropriate behavior, misconduct, or lack of leadership. 2 Marine Corps generals fired less than 2 weeks ago for not providing proper force protection in Afghanistan. An Army Brigadier General relieved of duty for adultery. An Army 2-star general fired for groping a civilian. And in March, a Navy 1-star removed for racially insensitive comments and abusive leadership. Last spring, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was so concerned about all the high-profile cases, he sent a letter to Pentagon brass urging a recommitment to ethical leadership.
And that's why they're being removed.
Tehát a rendszer az alárendeltségre és a parancs végrehajtásra épül. Tehát ebből a rendszerből csak úgy tudunk kilépni, hogyha szellemi forradalmat csinálunk, és az állam felmondja a Biblia szerződését, mert a Biblia az egy szerződés az állam, az egyházak és a bankok között.